Well, coming up on today's show, Tesla heads towards a major milestone versus Jaguar. Mercedes could become EV market leader by 2021. And why you should be an early adopter with EVs. But first of all, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you're listening around the world. Hello and welcome to the Thursday, the 12th of July edition of EV News Daily. It's Martyn Lee here with the news you need to know about electric cars and the move towards sustainable transport. Hello to any England fans listening to the podcast today on Thursday. How's the sore head? Yeah, I'll speak a little bit more quietly in case the hangover hasn't worn off yet. Well, let's start by talking about BMW. And I had a petrol Mini for about a year back in 2008. It was black. It was bags of fun. Not quite the Mini Cooper, but a great little car. And around that time, before I was interested in EVs, there was the original Mini E that I was totally unaware of until years later. A pilot program, which was then discontinued to test an electric Mini. Had a reasonable sized battery and did like 100 miles and was a good first attempt. But that was 10 years ago. I would have another Mini tomorrow. They are great for British roads. Small enough to park in the tiny parking spaces that we have, but big enough for long journeys. So, fast forward 10 years since the last time I owned a Mini, and I'm excited about the new electric Mini EV. Well, Car Scoops says that our sneaky shutterbugs have caught a prototype, both inside and out, undergoing testing out in the wild. The prototype was also spied plugged into the mains in a dedicated EV charging and parking spot. The grille is also completely covered, suggesting that there's no combustion engine inside. So, probably isn't a variant of the Countryman plug-in hybrid. That prototype with no grille is bound to be full electric. It can't really be a hybrid. No cooling in there. Well, Car Scoops has 14 pictures of the Mini in the yellow swirly camouflage, and I'll put a link to their article in the show notes so you can see for yourself, but they do have just one of the inside. Now, the dash is covered in black cloth, another sign that they're getting close, what you normally see when they start to work on the insides of the cars. You know, production's on the way. There's 3 extra screens inside the prototype. There's a large, what looks like a computer monitor, sitting on a box on the passenger seat, and then there's 2 smaller screens about the size of an iPad mini stuck to the dash. Can't quite see what they're displaying, but probably some sort of telematics, some sort of testing software the BMW are running in their Mini EV. In the footwells of the passenger side, you can see masses of wires. And how about this? You know, on a bus or a coach or a train, you see those metal hammers often behind glass next to the window, which says, in case of emergency, break glass and smash window to escape. Yeah, those. I can see one of those taped to the driver's door, just next to the door handle. So, does that mean, why would you put one of those in a prototype? Does that mean that the windows are locked in the up position and you have to do that for health and safety rules in case there is an accident and you've got to get out? Is it because the electric windows are disabled and they've not wired up that bit of the car yet? Either way, I think it's a sign they're getting close to production. Meanwhile, the India Times reports that BMW Group and the biggest Chinese SUV brand, Great Wall Motor, announced a partnership on Tuesday of this week to produce the electric Mini in China, as was rumoured, and as global automakers ramp up to development under pressure from Beijing. Well, auto brands in China are required to make electric vehicles at least 10% of their fleet sales starting next year, or buy credits from competitors that exceed their quotas. Well, later they face pressure to raise those sales in order to satisfy fuel efficiency requirements, and that goes up annually. Well, the last I heard, for Western markets at least, the Mini EV is going to be made here in the UK, actually, somewhere called Oxford. But given the, I think I can say, disastrous process of Brexit, it's where we all, I say we all, a proportion of the country voted to leave the European Union. And that means trying to untangle decades worth of British manufacturing legislation and contracts and agreements from a tariff-free customs union to us being outside of the European Union, standing on our own. We are really worried about car makers in this country, that we're worried they're going to find it both easier and actually cheaper to move production wholesale to the European Union, because you can then move those cars much more easily and, I say, cheaply. Leaving the EU is currently looking like really bad for the auto industry in particular here in the UK. We're super worried. Well, moving on to Tesla, and the market intelligence company AID have been tracking Tesla sales versus Jaguar sales. And they say that Tesla already snapping at the heels of Jaguar. The question now is, as AID's segment observers have put it most topically, based on the latest sales surge for Tesla and the Model 3s, it is not if Tesla are going to be a bigger company than Jaguar on the global stage, it's when and how soon. Well, AID say that figures compiled every month reveal that in Q2, thanks to the long-expected sales bounce from the Model 3, over in the US, worldwide sales of Tesla skyrocketed to 40,740, according to Tesla. In a world where almost everything is relative, that directly compares to the only slightly higher 44,000 worldwide Jaguar sales in the same quarter. As I saw Kyle Field from Clean Technica say today on Twitter, lazy headline writers are going to have to stop using the phrase Tesla killer, because when they start becoming bigger than companies like Jaguar, they're going to have to be called Jaguar killers. Well, the thing I would like to add to this, at this stage, not talking down Tesla, but just thinking it through, of course, those figures with Jaguar don't include the I-Pace. Now, is the I-Pace a mass market, huge seller with tens of thousands of cars per quarter? Probably not. I don't know, because I haven't seen anything confirmation-wise from Jaguar on how many Magna are going to be making for them. However, those figures don't include that yet. And the I-Pace we know is really popular and probably going to be a great seller. We just don't know the numbers yet. So that would be the only caveat to that. However, you can't deny that the Model 3 with 20,000, if they can sustain 5,000 a week, 20,000 a month being made is a big number. I'll put a link to AID, by the way, in the show notes. You can see more about what they do and the service that they offer, their kind of subscription newsletter. Well, I know I'm a simpleton who thinks out loud on a wildly unpopular podcast, but I do get confused sometimes. Jim Collins over at Forbes seems to think that Tesla has missed the boat to sell cars in China. Jim says this, and I quote, "It's too late for Tesla to ride the Chinese EV boom," end quote. Well, let's see what Jim says in this Forbes article, and I quote, "Tesla's huge head start in Western markets for high-end BEVs does not exist in China, as evidenced by the rash of senior executive departures in recent months. Elon Musk seems to like to do things on his own, but the Chinese market, which has flourished through so many East-West partnerships, is a very different animal, and Tesla simply does not have the capital to compete there," he says, end quote. I'll put a link to the articles I've picked out some quotes there, but I'll put the whole thing in the show notes for you to read if you want to. He seems to conclude, if I'm reading this right, Forbes concludes that because Tesla are dominant at the moment in the US, that they should expect to be dominant in China? Obviously not. I don't think I've ever heard Elon or Tesla say they expect domination in China, just that they need to build a gigafactory on every continent, as it happens, to make the kind of cars that local market wants at the kind of prices the local market will pay, which local people desire and can afford. So it's weird. The headline, actually, this is a weird article. You find this with Tesla articles, they're so weird. The headline bears no relevance really to the meat of the article. Has Tesla missed the boat, as Forbes says? No, obviously not. New energy vehicles sales are on target to double in China. It's a massive market growth at the moment. Unlike in the US, where Tesla literally had to create a market for EVs. Mass market for EVs. There is currently one exploding in China. So for everybody who says that Tesla were wrong to do it first and early, well, then they wait for China's market to explode. Then they're wrong for waiting. I'll put a link to it just so that you can have a look for yourself. Well, staying with Tesla, and Elon Musk has tweeted about the Model 3 available for test drives. Should be very soon. He says we've already made around 100 Model 3 performance cars for test drives in stores, said Elon's tweet. On last week's edition of Ride the Lightning, the podcast with Ryan McCaffrey, he was speculating, I think it was last week, he was speculating if you'd rather take a base model or a performance model for a test drive. What would be best for customers? Is it best to drive the base one, then be pleasantly surprised when you get your P3, maybe the P3D, or is it better to drive the fast one and know that yours will be slower if you order the base model? Well, he tweeted Elon, and he got a response, which was that one. It looks like they've gone down the avenue then of letting people ride the P3D and hoping if the customers, the test drivers had planned on getting a base model, to upsell them. And that's a normal thing for any business to upsell all of their customers. There's nothing wrong with that. All the anti-selling looks like it's over now. Remember when Elon used to tweet back reservation holders of the Model 3 with things like, hey, you should buy a Model S if you want like your car now. The kind of anti-selling of the Model 3 because they've just got so many reservations is all over. By the way, I've been playing a lot with the configurator. A lot. My favourite combo so far, it's white on white. I really like the look of the white multi-coat paint and the white interior. That's mine. It's not mine, clearly, because we're a year away from having them in the UK, but that's what I would go. And the red is beautiful, but the multi-coat white, woohoo! Yes, please. If you see one of those, tell them it's my car. Well, talking about being an early adopter of EVs, Huffington Post says electric cars are the future, and you should be an early adopter, and maybe you should catch up with EVs because of another way to travel, and that is electric motorbikes. Richard Jordan says Huffington Post, director of Super Soco, supplies 22 motorcycle dealers with the Tesla of motorcycles. Of course, that is the easy way out sometimes to draw that straight line. Well, Lucy Sheriff in Huffington Post written a great article about early adopters of EVs. As for any downsides to being an early adopter with these, well, not really. You can travel much more cheaply. An electric bike is more nimble, nippy through traffic. The cost per mile around £1 coming into London, she says, costs almost no money at all. The battery's removable, you can charge it at work when you're in the office, and therefore your travel is free as well. I'll put a link to that article in the show notes. Well, Mercedes could become the EV market leader by 2021, according to amonline.com. This is a company called PA Consulting, who I've never heard of, but maybe they're a big consulting company that know what they're talking about. They say that Mercedes-Benz is due to overtake Tesla and become the market leader in EVs in 2021. Interesting, because Mercedes are a little bit behind at the moment. Got some cars coming, but still nothing you can really buy, and the only pure EV which they did have is now discontinued. So, although there's other companies like BMW and VW from Germany, they put Mercedes at the top of the pile, and I think it's interesting. Of course, there's the Renault, Nissan, Mitsubishi alliance. They're going to be making a lot of cars. VW, like them or loathe them, can make cars on scale, and we're talking about factories that make 800,000 cars a year, right? They know how to do supply chains. So, interesting that this report puts Mercedes at the top of the EV list. Again, I'll put a link to that article in the show notes so you can see what they are talking about. Well, staying with Tesla, and just another final couple of stories that we picked up today. Lots going on for them. Simon Alvarez at Teslarati, who incidentally got a retweet by Elon recently, has been tracking the VIN numbers and keeping an eye on the Twitter channel Model 3 VINs, says that Tesla's registered another large batch of over 6,000 Model 3 VINs, almost all of them dual motor, so the all-wheel drive variant of the Model 3. The new vehicle identification filings come at a time when Tesla's actively pushing for deliveries, and the recent filing, says Simon, is another sign Tesla is on its way to sustaining production of 5,000 Model 3s per week in Q3. You may remember that lots of people said they'll never make 5,000 Model 3s a week, and then as it got closer, it was really the final week of June, and they all changed their tune. Oh, well, if they do make 5,000, it's a surge. They'll never carry on, or it'll be at the expense of the other models. Well, they still made 2,000 Model S and X and did 5,000 Model 3, and they look like they are continuing with another 6,000 VINs registered yesterday. Well, we'll see, eh? With so many people set to get a Model 3, Fred Electric, finally, has obtained an email from customers where Tesla are moving, well, they're trialling, I think, a handover that's a lot quicker than the existing one. If you've bought a Tesla, you know that the handover can be almost an hour-long hoopla. It's great. You're made to feel very special. The car is uncovered from a silk cloth draped over it. You get a nice long handover, how to use the car and all of that. You really do feel very special. They're trying to trial a 5-minute quickie, because sometimes you just need a 5-minute quickie if you're in a hurry. And maybe Tesla Model 3 buyers don't want to hang around for hours in the delivery centre. How about following these instructions on the email? You watch some Model 3 tutorial videos they've made, review the manual, visit your showroom for additional questions, sign and drive at the time they allot you, you check in, you sign your paperwork, you have a 5-minute vehicle handoff where they show you the essentials. You get your charging bundle, key access, vehicle start-stop, and then how to engage park, reverse, neutral, and drive. Well, Tesla's produced 9 short videos to show different features of the Model 3 in prep for the program. if you ask me, inevitable, because you can't keep handing over cars an hour at a time and making a song and dance over them for every single Model 3 buyer, with 450,000, say, ballpark figure, getting those, maybe 500,000. Well, not when you have 5,000 cars this week to hand over, and 5,000 cars next week, and 5,000 cars the week after. All right, you get my drift. I'll stop now. But I think the Model S and the Model X, the $150,000 cars, I think you'll probably get a bit more of a premium treatment on that one. But the Model 3 trialling a bit of a 5-minute quickie handover. What do you think of any of today's stories? Agree? Disagree? Do you have some thoughts on those? Maybe on the new Mini, about where they're making it? Would you buy one of those Minis? Not big enough for the market where you listen around the world? Is it big enough for American markets? Perfect for British roads, but our roads are old and tiny. What do you think about the Tesla volumes beating Jaguar, or Tesla expanding into China? What do you think of using performance models for test drives for the Model 3, 100 of those being used for test drives? And what do you think about the idea that Mercedes is actually going to be the world's EV leader in 2021? Leave your comments on any of the usual places that you download the podcast, or the usual podcast channels for all previous 177 of these bad boys. iTunes, Google Play, by the way. Yeah, a quick sidebar. Google Play, thank you so much to one of our listeners, and I will name check you whilst I look at you on my phone, emailed me to say that it has stopped updating. That would be Philippe Calvé. Thank you, Philippe. I really appreciate it. He couldn't, the last 3 haven't downloaded for him, so I sent a note to Google, and to Google's credit, they got straight back to me saying they are having issues with Libsyn, who I use for the podcast. That's who I pay a reasonable amount of money per month to sort out all of the podcast stuff, and Libsyn are having issues with Google, or vice versa. So if you use Google Play, maybe just bear with us. That is being fixed for all Google Play, by the way. Spotify, take them. TuneIn and Stitcher. If you're in your Tesla, you can use TuneIn for this. And the audio always goes on YouTube, where it's probably pretty easy to make a comment about any of those stories. And the blog at evnewsdaily.com. If you want to subscribe, you get them first and free and automatically. And if you want to leave a little review or a star rating on any of those platforms, I'd be so grateful. Well, thank you for listening today. If you want to say hi on the socials, search EV News Daily. Have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you tomorrow.